Our story out front, a decent proposal after laughing off the president's proposal last week to avoid the fiscal cliff. House Speaker John Boehner today put out his own terms for a deal, which he says adds up to $2.2 trillion in savings. Boehner's deal includes $800 billion in savings from tax reform, from closing special interest loopholes and deductions, $600 billion in so-called health savings, which includes changes to Medicare, $300 billion other mandatory savings, $300 billion in further discretionary savings. The White House swiftly shot it down with a statement saying this: until the Republicans in Congress are willing to get serious about asking the wealthiest to pay slightly higher tax rates, we won't be able to achieve a significant balanced approach to reduce our deficit. Out front tonight, Republican Senator Tom Coburn of Oklahoma, a man who's been called one of the keys to reaching a real deal. It's nice to see you, sir. Thank you for your time this evening. We appreciate it.
I'm glad to be with you.
Thank you. Let's begin with this letter that comes is addressed to the president and comes from the Majority Leader Boehner. And in this letter, he sort of lays out part of his plan. What do you think of his plan as we've laid out so far, and in the specifics, this letter?
Well, I think the first thing that I heard you say is the White House has already reacted negatively to it, which is really concerning to me. Look, what he offered was what Erskine Bowles offered to the Select Committee as a compromise between the Democrats and the Republicans. I'm certain that if this is not good enough for the White House, we will go over the fiscal cliff.
So
because this is a compromise on taxes, this is a compromise on mandatory spending, and it's a compromise on discretionary spending over what the Select Committee had debated.
Okay, let's get to some of the details if we can. And I should mention that Erskine Bowles has put out a statement himself, and he says this: while I'm flattered the Speaker would call something the Bowles plan, the approach outlined in the letter that Speaker Boehner sent to the President does not represent the Bowles-Simpson plan, nor is it the Bowles plan. In my testimony before the Joint Select Committee on Deficit Reduction, I simply took the midpoint of the public offers put forward during the negotiations to demonstrate where I thought a deal could be reached at the time. He's very much backing away from Speaker Boehner's letter. But the question I wanted to ask you, sir, is some of the details. And as you know, it's all in...
Can we spend one more point on that?
Of course.
What did he say? That was the midpoint of a compromise from the two. So here's Speaker Boehner, who is taking a midpoint on the compromise between the two sides and offered it, and it's already flatly rejected.
Well, I think what he might be rejecting, sir, if I may...
No, I'm not talking about Erskine Bowles. I'm talking about the White House's response to it.
Well, let's get to that, too. I think what Erskine Bowles is saying in his statement that this letter from Speaker Boehner does not represent his theory, number one. But I think the line that the White House is having problems with, and I believe I found it in page 2 of the Speaker's letter. I'll read it to you if I can. He says this: notably, the new revenue in the Bowles plan, what he's calling the Bowles plan, would not be achieved through higher taxes, which we continue to oppose and will not agree to in order to protect small businesses and our economy. Instead, new revenue would be generated through pro-growth tax reform that closes special interest loopholes and deductions while lowering rates. I'm going to guess that that is the very line, in fact, that the White House is going to say no deal to, right?
So let me understand. If in fact we want $800 billion in new revenues, and we can do that through closing loopholes, limiting deductions for the very wealthy in this country, and we're going to not have a deal because it's not a rate increase, but rather taking the same amount of money from the same people, and we're going to say no to that?
Well, there are people who said the math doesn't work out, that closing loopholes, frankly, doesn't actually get you enough money.
Soledad, I've been studying this for 7 years. That's baloney. It's easy to get $800 billion out of the wealthy in this country by limiting deductions and taking away options that are specifically benefit only the well-off in this country.
Okay, but
all you have to do is, for example, people making more than $250,000 a year, should we give them a mortgage deduction on their vacation home? Should we? In other words, they won't even consider any of that because it offends too many constituencies.
Well, you have said, sir, and I'll read you your own words if I may. You've said, I'm all for the very wealthy paying more taxes. So I'm curious, since you've said that, why the reluctance to just raise the tax rate on the wealthy?
Because it destroys growth of the very people who are going to create additional revenues in the future.
Then why say you would be all for it?
I didn't ever say, not one time did I say I was for raising tax rates on the wealthy. I said I was for increasing the taxes that the wealthy paid. How you do it will have a major impact on the economic fortunes of this country. And if you take the vast majority of small businessmen who will be hit with an increased tax rate, you're going to markedly decrease the job creation and the capital formation in this country.
So let me ask you another question, because one of the things we've talked about really on both sides, I think it's fair to say, is the lack of details. And Secretary Geithner was out trying to defend some of the details in his plan over the weekend. This letter also has very few details. I'm curious to know exactly what loopholes, what deductions would you kill? I think for a lot of people who worry about the child care credit or the mortgage deduction would like to know specifically what's on the line and at what rate.
Well, I put out a report called Subsidies for the Rich and Famous about a year ago that listed $30 billion a year we could take from the very wealthy on things that only they get a significant advantage from. So it's not that we can't do it. It is we can. We're all this jockeying in public. We need real leadership right now. There shouldn't be anything offered in public. What it should be is the president and Speaker Boehner in a room, and nobody come out of the room till this is solved. Because the long term, we're playing gotcha politics, and that has nothing to do with the long-term best interest of this country. And what we ought to be is, I'm okay to compromise even on some of my issues if in fact we'll solve the problem. But what we have is a game being played for the extreme right wing and the extreme left wing in this country, rather than coming together and leading and solving the problem.
Thank you, sir. We appreciate your time.
You're welcome. Good to see you, Soledad.
Thank you. Likewise. Out front next, the U.S. ambassador to the UN, Susan Rice, comes under